Good evening and thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Spectrum Xtra live on Radio 1 FM 19. It's 12th day of July 2024. This being a Friday, it's our culture here to review the major events of the week. So today we'll be looking at the Kenyan situation and we'll be asking a question. Is it a crisis or growth of democracy? Well, Kenyan President William Ruto fired his cabinet yesterday and retained only the Prime Minister, who also doubles as a Secretary for Foreign Affairs. He has now decided to carry out wider consultations with a view of forming a broader national government. Now the question is, who is likely to be in this government? Are we likely to see the opposition that has claimed to be the legitimate winners of the last elections being brought on board in this particular government? Is there going to be a handshake? Well, he said that once this government is instituted, they will embark on dealing with the problems Kenya is facing. One of them is the debt situation, raising local revenues, unemployment, wastage of resources, and corruption. Now, you know very well that there were protests in Kenya following that particular bill, the finance bill, which had introduced a number of tax measures. President Ruto yielded to the call of the young people and withdrew the bill. The young people followed with a demand that he needed to disband his government, and so he has followed their demands. Today, the Inspector General of Police in Kenya, Japhet Koome, resigned, allegedly for failing to manage well the protest in which over 39 people were killed last month. Now, the debate raging on is whether this is a crisis or an indication that Kenya is growing democratically. Others are wondering if Ruto has not given away too much, and the possibility that the youth might actually demand that he should also quit office. So we'll be looking at that issue in detail. We'll also be crossing over to Chiankwanzi, where our cabinet, a week-long cabinet retreat is taking place in Chiankwanzi. It's likely to end over this weekend. The main aim of this retreat, according to what we had, it's to streamline service delivery. That's why, apart from ministers, we have permanent secretaries also attending this particular retreat. Now, one of the major issues that has been identified as a hindrance to service delivery is corruption. President Yoweri Museveni spoke about it and said it's a huge challenge given the fact that we are losing about 10 trillion shillings annually through that vice. He actually said he will not allow the corrupt in his government, and even at one point suggested that if it was possible, the judiciary should join this fight and deny all those charged for such crimes bail. So we'll be waiting to see what will be happening following the outcome of that retreat. Are we likely to see a cabinet or the government actually working differently? Are we likely to see action even on the side of corruption? My name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host. I have a panel of 4. The Honorable Simon Mulongo, governance and security expert who did represent Pubulo East in Parliament, served as the deputy head of the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us, Honorable Simon.
Good evening, colleagues, and I'm very excited and happy to be here once again, particularly with my colleagues. Thank you.
Our second panelist, Ms. Perry Aritu, Executive Director at Women Democracy Network, Uganda chapter. She's a lawyer and pundit on governance and human rights matters. Good evening, Ms. Perry. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum Xtra.
Thank you, Kenneth. Good evening, listeners and viewers, and my fellow panelists.
We're joined by Ms. Sarah Birete, Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. She's also a pundit on human rights and governance issues. It's a pleasure having you on this panel, Dr. Sarah Birete. Thank you very much for making time.
Thank you for inviting me again, and good evening, listeners and viewers.
And after some time away, we welcome the Honorable Paul Mwiru. He's a former Ginger East Member of Parliament. He is from the National Unity Platform Party. He's also a lawyer in this particular country. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us, Honorable Paul Mwiru.
Thank you. Good evening, listeners and viewers.
All right. Let me begin with you, Dr. Sarah. You've been following closely the events unfolding in Kenya, and we have a number of times had a discussion here about the Kenyan situation, the level of their democracy. We also reflected on the finance bill when the debate was raging on. Did you see what happened yesterday actually coming? Dr. Ruto disbanding his cabinet.
The Gen Zs were persistent and clear in their demands, and I don't think they were about to leave the street. But what's the background of what happened yesterday? The first president to disband cabinet was Mzee Jomo Kenyatta after protests leading to the firing of Mzee Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. He disbanded the whole cabinet and then reconstituted it again. The second time was under Mwai Kibaki, who also disbanded cabinet after corruption scandals, and he reconstituted a new team. So Ruto becomes the third Kenyan president to disband cabinet. When Mwai Kibaki fired cabinet, the nation screamed with a big headline, "Cabinet sacked." And the voice of the vice president, attorney general, among others, were all sent home then. But under the new constitution, President Ruto cannot fire the deputy president because they are elected on a joint ticket. So you realize that that's the only difference in this culture of firing the whole cabinet and then you remain alone. Cabinet exercises power on behalf of the president, so they can be hired and fired, and that's one of the things Ugandans keep wondering why it takes long this time to even make a reshuffle. Even when the president makes a reshuffle, he's apologizing. I've made many adjustments. He's like apologizing for those he has sent away. So, but going back to Kenya. Going back to Kenya, the Gen Zs, powered by technology, with the powers to mobilize and act, have been angered by the leaders, the reasons for the demonstrations, the leaders living in opulence, abnormal corruption, lack of jobs, and the high cost of living. These were the spark of concerns by the generation. It's also important to note that the youth on the streets are not from the poorest of the families. They are from the middle class families, some of them from high political, families like the son of the Attorney General. So it's not that it's the riffraff of society demonstrating in Kenya. It's not. And that also makes a big difference. When you see there would be privileged youth, and you could see, even tell by appearance, that these are privileged youth from international schools, from high-profile universities, and other youth from the corporate world are the ones who took up the streets, of course joined by others. But in our circumstances, why I'm raising this, it's rare to find the privileged class being bothered with bad governance in the country, and that's why we have a problem in this country. So when President Ruto then meets this demand, after abandoning the tax amendments, after abandoning the salary increments, among other concessions he has been making, he has now made a bigger concession of sending cabinet home, because that was a key demand. I've been following Kenyan events with some of the leaders, including Eric Omondi, the comedian, who said now we need the counties reduced from 47, 35, from 49 to about 30. They want affirmative action seats done away with. They want all appointed MPs done away with. So that I saw yesterday, and the demands are likely to keep coming. So when you see the social movement, the Gen Z movement, which is partyless, non-partisan, leaderless, and fearless, I think that the future of Kenya is in the right place, because youth, the Gen Z are the future, and the future have put their feet down on governance.
All right. We'll be getting back to you to dig deeper. Let's hear from you, Honorable Simon Mulongo. You were equally here when we did discuss this issue as it was beginning. Did you see it culminating in what happened yesterday?
Yes and no. No, because we didn't know how much it will really impact, because the demands were quite outrageous. Some of them looked like they were very difficult to comprehend and unimplementable. But yes, because there was a build-up in which the president was clearly threatened. And you could see the submission in terms of voice, in terms of change of communication language, in terms of opening up to dialogue with the Gen Zs and so on. So this meant that, and then promising afresh, reassuring them that whatever they were discussing would implement. And of the 10 issues, key issues that the Gen Z brought, one was to reject the finance bill, dissolve cabinet, reconstitute IEBC, scrap caste positions, audit national debt, employ intern doctors, austerity measures in government, zero tolerance to corruption, investigate police brutality, and then young people in government. So of these, he's been able to do at least 5. So this means that he's ticking the boxes. So really, you could see that the president was boxed, and he had no way of turning around. If he was in a metallic cage, they got him there. So I think that yes, I wouldn't have known how much it would be, but definitely this was quite a shock that the entire government was dissolved, so to say, of the political appointees.
Right. So some people were suggesting that maybe he has given away too much, risky. Next, they actually might be demanding that you should step down. Well, and some people have been actually saying, well, why hasn't he acted like the other leaders in some other countries, where they will say, to hell with you, I have the mandate, order the military, the police to get on the street and deal with the young people.
I think President Ruto has had to adjust his position on that. When he started with the roaring as the head of state and wanting to counter the demonstrations and protests. And when he succeeded visibly, and they're actually coming after him, and that's when they stopped, because in Mombasa and in Nakuru, they managed to overpower and enter the state houses. So I think because the degree to which he saw power slipping out of his hands, he was so terrified that he had to come to terms. So, and then he also realized that the security agencies were not as helpful. Because they were not. And why the chief of police has resigned is because is one of the things was speaking on mic to say that, please, can you bring the other names? This police commissioner should go. This IGP must go. So he was talking about it. So the police commissioner, IGP, fully to resign. So to me, the president knows that if he does not play ball, he will reduce chances of his survivability. So by playing ball and trying to engage as if to stand by and with the protesters, the Gen Zs, then he will isolate those few who wanted the shouting, Ruto must go, and allow those who want reforms. And that's what he has done, is actually to recapitalize himself and create a new constituency. Because he knows that the old constituency is heavily eroded. And he knows that 2027, this new constituency is going to be a key determinant. So he has to play cards in a manner that he woos and tries to associate himself with the Gen Zs who are progressive in their thinking. And
Perry,
that's what he's doing.
Perry, let's hear from you. Is this a crisis or growth of democracy, seeing what is happening?
You know, someone said democracy is not handed over on a silver platter. And I think Kenyans have proved that. But if you track this whole thing, right from 2022 after Ruto won the election, there was actually an outcry about how he had formed his cabinet. Most people argued that he had just appointed cronies, actually 3 ministers who had been elected as members of parliament, resigned when they were appointed as ministers. In fact, I don't know what they're going to do now, because they left their positions as
to concentrate
MPs,
on
to concentrate
ministerial
on
positions.
So there had been that accusation, and Kenya, I think for years, had known that to become a minister you must be a technocrat, because your work is to formulate policy and ensure that policy is implemented. So they were used to having technocrats in these positions, a lean cabinet, serious people who can be able to advise the president so that the country grows. So right from 2022, people were unhappy, and then they had scandals, especially Ministry of Health and Agriculture. I know agriculture was accused of purchasing fake fertilizers. You know, so this has been brewing for some time. So for me, it shows that when there's a problem, leaders must act before it becomes bigger. Because if he had acted then, when those voices were saying, look, you'd rather have technocrats who can formulate policy, who can implement policy and take us forward, maybe they would not be in this situation. The thing is, you cannot ignore a young population, especially an educated population. If you listen to many of those youth, they say, by the way, we are educated. We are not people who are just languishing with no education. That's why they were able to, mobilize themselves using social media and different means. But their demands are valid, because if they are the majority and they are seeing access to jobs are very few, they are seeing opportunities being given to those who already have. You look at the opulence of the ruling class. I mean, it's obscene that you have medical interns saying, look, we need to be facilitated. You have teachers saying, we need our salaries increased. And then you have this ruling class being paid colossal sums of money. This was bound to happen. And for him, unfortunately for Kenya, their constitution says you can only have 2 terms. So for him, it's a do or die. I don't know whether he will come back for a second term. So he knows that he has to account, because he has one more chance. If he even, finishes his term, depending on how he handles the situation. I want to agree with Simon that maybe he's playing what we call chess.
All right.
He knows if I don't ally or if I don't concede to some of these demands, then the demand will become you go. In fact, for other countries, what they would do is to call an early election. I don't know what their constitution says, but other countries in crisis call an election.
A snap election.
Yeah.
All right.
You.
Let's hear from Honorable Paul Muiru. Your view on the Kenyan situation.
Well, thank you, Kenneth. I have a holistic approach, because you have to trace it back from colonialism, in my view, that the situation in Kenya is not different from what is in Uganda. You trace it from 1920, just like the way you trace it from 1893 in the Ugandan situation, that when the colonialists declared Kenya and Uganda British colonies, they found us running some systems, running our economics, running everything. They brought in their system. When they granted independence to Kenya in 1963, just like Uganda, they did not decommission the tools of colonialism, and they were all left behind. If you take an example of the economy, you cannot talk about the national economy of Kenya without talking IMF and World Bank. You cannot talk about the same in Uganda without IMF and World Bank. From the look of things, I was looking at apparently that the young people in Kenya have actually taken a revolutionary approach of knowing that, one, the governance structure as is was still left by the colonialist, and however changing the real governance structure and the approach to issues, because what we have as governance tools, the politics, the parliament, the judiciary, the police, all those
institutions,
instruments were not decommissioned by the colonialist. Because if you look at the forces, these are tools of operation by those leading the people. If you go to budget corruption, like when they do these budgets, they mean very little to the people. Because you'll know that IMF and World Bank, they may determine which part of the budget is to be funded by them, and they will direct every affair within the state, to the extent that whether you like it or not, the politics as is still, it is to the benefit of the colonialist, to the extent that the elites, in my view, have remained agents of the colonialist. So they are around as agents of colonialism. That's why you have realized that the young people, the GZ, they have actually been demanding for practical solutions, which to the elites, some looks radical. You understand? But they intend wanting to address, to say that, look, we must have a start. We must have a discussion about some of these issues. And I want to applaud President Ruto, because you see, it was so intriguing to many that you see young people genuinely trying to demonstrate. Then you see one actually getting out of the ambit of what is permissible. The patience, actually, they kept. You had the police, you had the army. It would have gone at rampage and actually caused more destruction. So to me,
They would have shut down internet.
it would have done many things. You understand? So to me, this is the time for the discussion.
All right.
For instance, the education system people are having in Kenya. When my friend Molongo, they go to the village, they tell people, you people educate children. This is the gateway to changing lives. But if you if you did the research about all these universities, 90% of those graduates are not doing what they studied.
All right.
You find many seated selling a shop with a bachelor's in statistics.
All right.
Another
Spectrum
doing
Extra
something very
for
different.
Radio 1 FM
Even
90.
border.
We need to go for a break now.
yeah.
When we return, we will expound this discussion, especially on what kind of government is likely to follow now that the cabinet has been disbanded. But then also, could there be a possibility that there are people behind these youths? Because some people have actually been saying, how come they are so organized? And the possibility of actually these youth becoming a political force in Kenya. Are they likely to form a wider movement that is concrete enough to claim leadership in that country? Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90. We're broadcasting from the Central Building here in the heart of our city, Kampala. But we're also live on our website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. And we are also live on DSTV. Our audio channel there is 897. But you can also find us on the different radio listening apps, which can be obtained from the Google stores of your smartphone. My name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host, and today we are reviewing the major events of the week. I'm speaking to the Honorable Simon Mulongo, Ms. Peria Ritua, Dr. Sarah Birete, and the Honorable Paul Mwiru. We have started by looking at the Kenyan situation. The panelists have shared their initial thoughts, and at this point I would also like to encourage you to share your views with us using the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. Tell us what you think about the Kenyan situation and what lessons can other countries actually borrow from there. Now let's dig deeper, and I'll come to you, Honorable Simon Mulongo. Looking at how these things have been actually shaping up, there are people who have been actually saying there must be a force behind it. Like Paul Mwiru actually suggested, some of these issues are deeper, going back as way back to the colonial times when some families became powerful in Kenya, and therefore they have to call the shots. And when all these dynamics mix up, probably there are some people who could be indirectly fighting President Ruto. What's your take on that?
Well, I remember previously I did mention that the way the uprising of these youths, their protests, the nature of organization, the fallback positions, the treatment centers that were hastily organized, not in one place but several of them, the ambulances to help to facilitate evacuation of the injured, and all that is more than it can be abrupt. I don't think it was spontaneous, because it's too good to be spontaneous. A percentage of it, the core of it, was not spontaneous. There were organizers who were increasingly getting angry with President Ruto's regime, starting from increased taxes, which started in the previous year, 2023, 2024. And everybody was cussing. And when this time the bill came up with much more structured and more elaborate, more burdening taxes, then they said they could not stomach it. So then that's one. The second one is that there were discontents on the part of those who were defeated. Actually, there are scores that had not been settled. And remember, winning by 50.05 means that a huge majority was not for him. So it was very easy to trigger this. In addition to the triggering issue of the finance bill and so on, but there are also all those other powerful families that lost elections and they were not up at all. And to make matters worse, there were some syndicates of edging them out, elbowing them out in terms of business, enterprises, and so on. Then the third one is the issue of trying to trim to size the former families of people like Kenyatta. When they trimmed them of their security services, they sent people who attacked their farms and so on, and looted the farms, and this really angered some of the big players. And remember, some of these families, 1% of Kenyan heavyweights in terms of wealth control over 50% of the wealth in Kenya. So it was very easy for them to mobilize and strike a matchstick to already fertile ground. So to me, these youths had the core of them were coordinated, bankrolled, facilitated, and this happened through and through. Of course, Dr. Birete was referring to the fact that some of these youths were affluent. When I'm walking on the streets in Nairobi, I see the people who are walking around or going home have stark difference with the people walking home in Kampala. Like if you're at the clock tower, former clock tower, and people are walking away, you see people who look a little stage or two down below those ones of Kenya. The Kenyans seem to be more affluent. The dress code, the picture they give is people who are really a little more able. So in addition to that, the core group that coordinated and mobilized were bankrolled. And the whole thing was much bigger than that. For example, there were some sleeper cells in the parliament. They knew who was where, what was where, even the security system, which was where, and that's why they had a vulnerable point through which they broke into parliament.
So you want to say it's bigger than the issue of the finance bill? It's bigger than the demands that the Gen Z have been putting across. Could it be probably leftovers from the contested elections?
Yes, leftover from the contested elections, the aftermath of elections where there was kind of payback, so that because Ruto was trimmed thoroughly in terms of bring out data things against him, mudslinging him and so on. Security cover was eroded and so on. He was paying back. He did the same. The close protection of the Kenyatta family was removed, and they had to replace them with the private security guards and so on. Some tycoons in Kenya who actually bankroll elections in Kenya, the Jews of Kenya, most of them on the side of Uhuru Kenyatta. So because of that, this became very angry that he was going personal. He was now going after them in their backyards. So they had to fight back. The other factor was superpowers. When Ruto was trying to talk hard against the West, the Western powers actually bankrolled Raila and his group, and they funded the protests. And this almost brought down the government of Ruto. He had to take heed until he had to be boxed into some consensus with them. So I think this cannot be just taken on the surface that this was just a local thing and there are no external. Definitely there are other geopolitical external interjections into the Kenyan riots.
All right, let's hear from you, Perry. From what you have seen and the manner in which these youth were actually organized, do you think there could be a force behind that? But also, do you think this youth can actually grow into a movement that can probably change the paradigm, can cause a paradigm shift in the politics of Kenya, claim the power and probably organize for election and get in there to run state affairs?
They have actually changed Kenya. That's what I've seen. Because I don't think President Ruto would have been able to concede to all those concessions if he had not been under pressure. So they are a social movement, and I think they have there's no section which is lacking. That's why you saw the lawyers going to court to ensure that they get bond, bail. You saw the medical workers ensuring that those who were hurt were treated. So it is a social movement. And I don't think Kenya will be the same ever again, because for long it was the elderly the senior citizens and, really controlling everything. But now if you hear a president saying, I will concede to this, we need to talk, we need to have a more broad-based government, we need to deal with corruption. And by the way, that has been one of the biggest outcries of the young people. Because they know that if you, first of all, reduce the cost of administration, you deal with the leakages in the budget, money will go to the right places. And if people are able to see some level of equity in terms of, the pay for work, because if you have more people being able to get paid for their labor instead of having a few who actually just recently, before this whole demonstrations, were asking for a pay rise. Some of them are asking for more opportunities, while these young people, the professionals, are saying we just need our interns, the doctors, to have better facilities. I mean, it's just unfair. And that's why when I hear people saying, no, they must have been organized and whatever. Yes, they could have organized or been organized, but the issues are real issues. These are issues that ordinary citizens deal with. And what for me is good is that the elites have joined these young people, because most times the elites, because of their comfort zones, don't take cognizance of what the ordinary person is going through, not knowing that if you don't care about those who don't have, you cannot be at peace. And I think they have proved that. What I have found positive is that at least they have been given an ear. Now, the thing that I found a little bit disheartening when I was coming here for the show, in Eldoret, they uncovered some bodies, dead bodies.
Is it in a mass grave? Or?
I think pockets of young people, and
killed?
that is already, yes, killed. So they are saying these must have been killed due to the demonstration. So that creates anger. Even when there was, some level of, people saying, okay, let's see if we can talk. That creates a lot of anger. So I'm hoping that those who have committed atrocities can be brought to justice, because justice is important in these conversations. Part of the anger of these young people is, why kill us when we are telling you we need to change things, that we need to change Kenya. The other thing is, of course, you can't dismiss the foreign arm in all this, because remember, Kenya has borrowed a lot of money to deal with its infrastructure improvements, so they will have to find a way of paying that money. And part of it is they must collect taxes. The thing is, how do you then balance between ensuring that you have revenue that meets the demands of the ordinary Kenyan, but you're also able to pay debt? And that's why the call for dealing with corruption, I think, is a big cry, which is similar to Uganda. Like, if you deal with the leakages, if you cut down public administration, you will save some money. And part of that message is what the young people are saying. Deal with corruption. Get serious technical people to be in your cabinet so that they're able to offer solutions to part of the problems that they're dealing with, because they have a big debt burden. So they have to be able to balance those two. And it's going to be interesting how they balance the demands of those they owe money, and then deal with the taxation internally, and also meeting the needs of these young people. Many unemployed, many saying the prices of basic products are too high. So it's really going to be an interesting trajectory for Kenya.
Benjamin Fred Twinamasco writes in and says the challenge of the Gen Z revolution in Kenya they will encounter is centered in its being faceless and leaderless. Once they are done with President Ruto, they will struggle to have a consensus on who leads them. Then we have a comment from Anthony who says, good evening, Spectrum Extra. What happened in Kenya is an act of betrayal and an act of conspiracy. We are used to that in Kenya, and it has now become a culture, and it keeps to continue because Kenya was established on a wrong foundation. Honorable Paul Muiru, your views on this. Are we likely to see some significant changes when this new cabinet is constituted? Are we likely to see the opposition getting in there? We know very well Raila Odinga has been campaigning around the African continent for that position in the AU. Is he likely to bounce back in some sort of opposition in the new cabinet that Ruto is likely to announce? What is your prediction? What are you reading going forward?
Unfortunately, personally, I don't pay attention to the faces of individuals. I'm interested to see an approach. If a sociological approach is actually adopted in dealing with the situations as they unfold in Kenya, there will be a solution. The Kenyans must interrogate, how did they reach where actually they are? I've heard people say, before, the politicians kept on thinking that actually The type we have here, that actually they would keep on dismissing agitators. Those are lumpenis. But all over the world, it used to be the lumpen proletariat causing change. The difference now in Kenya, that because of the deep-seated problems Kenya has had, arising out of the not having a national economy in Kenya, because then the education system producing people, you realize that now the bulk of the lumpen proletariat which have been in existence now, they have had another layer now of those who are educated, who have gone to school, who have actually joined them. The difference where people need actually to appreciate that if you look at those young boys and girls, if I'm to call them so, they are focusing on the redirections of the affairs within Kenya. But the framework as is that even Ruto, whether he dismisses the other means and brings others, in as long as the framework makes Ruto remain an agent of neocolonialism, you understand? To me, there will be no result. They will be the same, because Ruto can only make sense to the young people if he appreciates that Kenya does not have a national economy, but economic projects designed to benefit the foreigners who are there in Kenya. Once they go back on board and say, look, we must design an economy which is based on people's economic lifelines. So that as you're talking about the young people, you're talking about creating jobs by now. Ruto would be talking about creating, to me, 500,000 jobs to the young people, so that they find space. He would be talking about reviewing the education system to go vocational and address the issues. You understand? So the education system makes meaning to those agitation. Merely looking at the faces as people, for me, I'm not among those who are actually excited. I'm looking at seeing a sociological approach. The political sociologist must come out to study Kenya, because you see Kenya has become prone to those sparks. But what you need to actually to underscore in this whole situation, that the young people have stuck to long-lasting solutions. You saw Honorable Raila Odinga, like in a way trying to become part of the process. And the people told him, please, don't hijack our process. Because once you hijack them, the end result is going to be dialogue, because you are among the big stakeholders in terms of all those whom this economy benefits, that at the end of the day, any sting without an antidote which tends to address the problem of Kenya, if it is going to cause paralysis or to annoy the neocolonialist for whom there is agents within Kenya, the people in the least category would actually object.
All right.
So what the young people want, they want solutions to the deep-seated problems, in my view. How are they going to create long-lasting solutions? So the next financial year, they don't need to go back to the street to
make similar demands.
So that something is actually addressed. So they want to see homegrown solutions, to me, in my view, to the challenges. And one of those, they must decommission the tools of colonialism, which dictate the language, the education system, actually everything.
All right. Dr. Sarah, your take on this. What do you predict about the days that are coming ahead? A new cabinet? Are we likely to see some opposition elements in it? Are we likely to see a Kenya that is well-governed, a Kenya that is actually running very well? And the issues that Ruto raised, corruption, wastage, etc., are they likely actually to be addressed going forward, with all the interest that you say surround the situation?
So, as a bit of a background, if I answer your question, you see, the Gen Zs were first dismissed as TikTok anger, TikTok jokes. But I think today nobody can dare dismiss
to call them names.
The power of numbers and the energy of young people. For the first time, and the difference with the past demonstrations which are also characteristic of Kenya and the shoulders on which the Gen Zs are standing on. They have united beyond the ethnicity and party lines. And I think for me this is a new force, never seen before in Kenya. But also when you look at the power of technology, if a country has leverage, a bit of leverage on rule of law, institutions and systems, and where leaders govern, we are not saying they are perfect, but to some extent they govern in accordance with the constitution and people's wishes. So when you asked that, doesn't this weaken Ruto? I don't think so. I think Kenyans, that's what they expected, and that's why they were protesting, to make sure that they retain that people power. And whoever exercises that power exercises it in respect of people's demands, but also in accordance with the constitution. And that's what has been achieved. So going forward, Ruto has announced that he will form a government of national unity after consultations.
A broad-based government.
Yes, he has also said that he fired his cabinet after an evaluation.
A serious reflection and evaluation.
So he has evidence that they have failed to meet his own expectations as well as the expectations of the people. So I think the national dialogue now, the 150-man consultation team,
but isn't
where the Gen Zs have kept
that
away.
His problem? He appointed them.
No, I mean really, people can disappoint you. He's not the first. He's not the first. That's why I said that this is the third time. You know, against the side he supported in 2005. So it's not the first time. First of all, it's the third time in Kenya. But also, firing cabinet, I think, should strengthen a president. It shouldn't weaken. You can imagine if we woke up today, I saw President Museveni, I know we are coming to that, speaking tough in Changwanzi, but as he sits on table, he has a minister facing judges in anti-corruption court. Should we take him serious? Before he speaks tough, can he to government to first deal with these judges? So should we take him seriously? I think for me, a president who sees that my team has become baggage, they are weighing me down, let me set them free so that I can move with the people. I think it is a point of strength. And that's what he did. If dialogue results into something positive to navigate the challenges that Kenya is faced with today.
Serious, if you're a CEO in an organization and you think there's a problem in your organization where you took part in actually selecting the people who are in that organization, surely you can't fire all of them at once. There has to be a problem with you also.
But why not? I can tell them to reapply. And appoint a few or even appoint nobody. That is firing. And I think for me it's a point of strength for a political leader. Leave alone the civic organization. It's a point of strength. However, I'm aware of the comment by Senior Counsel Martha Karua on dialogue and the warning she has sent. She has said whenever there is, agitation in Kenya, people rush to call for dialogue with taking up a few positions in government and sharing power without true, effort to address the concerns of the people. I hope that it won't end up like this.
All right. Very quickly, Perry, when you look at how these events have actually shaped up, a number of concessions that President Ruto has actually accepted, and the pressure that keeps on coming, do you think he's likely to survive, even to go for the second term?
No, it could go two ways, because whenever there's conflict.
Dr. Sarah seems to suggest that to a politician, whatever he has done gives him a new lease of life.
No, that's what I'm saying. It could go two
ways.
No. Because conflict is part of life. So you can either use what happens as an opportunity to do things differently, or you can sink. So it could go two ways. Right now it's unpredictable, because if the young people who are agitating for certain things to be done feel he has not delivered, and if the other majority who will vote in the next election, then they can decide to vote him out of office. But if he's able to, do certain things and constantly explain to them why his hands are tied on others, because there are things he will not be able to do. I mean, how do you continue to pay debt when people are not paying a certain amount of taxes? He needs to constantly communicate, so that they're able to understand. But the other thing is deal with the things that you can deal with. The issue of corruption, you can, unless if you decide that that's how you want to run your government. Because if you're losing so much money that you could then get back, if you control those leakages, maybe you can reallocate it to some of the things that are not being funded. If you're able to deal with some of those recommendations that they had made of introducing, is it administrative secretaries, almost similar to our assistant RDCs, things where you're creating a bulky government yet you don't even have money. So do what you can within what you have, but constantly explain why you're making certain decisions. So it's two-way. He may either use it well or he may sink.
Honorable Mlongo, betrayal. One of the listeners here actually suggested that there's an element of betrayal here. Do you think there's been some sort of betrayal, maybe from the cabinet? Is it betrayal on some forces within Kenya? What could be going on?
Well, the manifestations of the response by the security services demonstrate some possibility that there was setback or even betrayal or even infiltration, because the NSIS, the Internal Security Organization of Kenya, did not show that, for example, they were able to detect in advance about the organization, the coordination, and abruptness of the spark of the protests. All security services were totally unaware. They were caught off guard. This shows that the intelligence services, both in police system and the NSIS, were not as spot on. The second one is how the police coordinated their act. You see, the protesters needed, under the Constitution, to be facilitated, guarded, so that they can do their peaceful demonstration. So that they cannot, no other forces could, for example, infiltrate and begin causing the destruction that happened, because we're told that there are some other saboteurs who came and joined the protesters and caused the destruction. I'm not sure about that, because to me, some of the youth themselves were destructive. But nonetheless, assuming that line of argument is correct, then the security forces were not up to the task. The other one is the extent of even the president calling on, he was so helpless. He has to call on the military to come in. And when the military came in, they were challenged by the court decision to examine what...
Follow the Constitution.
Yes, for the Constitution, and therefore they were under spotlight. What activities were they going to do? So in that case, it shows you that even that alone, there was no war room, so to say, operations and command center to coordinate the activities, to draw scenarios, and therefore draw courses of action to be done in such a way that they're within the law, but also to be effective on the ground. It did not. The youths totally overwhelmed the security services. To me, that speaks volumes.
All right.
They let down President Ruto. In fact, the way he has succumbed to the youths shows that actually he realized he was on his own.
All right. Spectrum Xtra on Radio 1 FM 90. We need to go for a break. But when we return, we'll be looking at the Ugandan cabinet retreat. One of the key issues that has been trending from Chankwazi is the tough talk from President Yoweri Museveni against the corrupt. The weekend papers are out. One daily is actually running with a story where ministers are being implicated in pocketing a whopping 6 billion shillings after selling Zoka Forest in Kayunga. Could this be one of the biggest issues that we need to deal with? in our country. Corruption, corruption, corruption. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra will continue. Thank you very much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week. We have just concluded a reflection on the Kenyan situation where President Ruto disbanded cabinet, and we were trying to understand what is likely to happen there. Most of the panelists are actually saying Kenya could be on the right trajectory, looking at some of the things that are likely to happen with the president listening to his people. Now let's shift the gears and come back home. Cabinet has been on retreat in Chankwanzi. The aim is to address service delivery. Permanent secretaries who handle funds in the different government departments were also in attendance. President Yoweri Museveni once again sounded a warning about corruption, saying it could not be accepted. The country is losing 10 trillion shillings annually. He actually said that those who are corrupt should not be held with kid gloves, including by the judiciary. Those that are being tried should not be actually allowed bail. Well, we know people have been complaining about corruption and a number of issues being raised. The president also said there will be more units put in place to actually fight corruption. For instance, there's a unit which was formed not so long ago to deal with tax evasions, under declarations, and money diversion. Will this be helping this country? He also stressed the importance of you people actually demanding for your right, demanding for service delivery, and joining the government in fighting fighting against corruption. So let's reflect on this issue, and I'll begin with you, Honorable Paul Mwilu. Chankwanzi, tough talk against corruption. Will we see a different cabinet when this retreat actually closes?
Thank you, Kenneth. Chankwanzi to me it is the usual talk. The president must have done a study and understood that actually corruption is one of the issues which need to be tackled. But of course, other than the lip service, there is nothing which is going to actually to come out of the effort. Why am I saying that? You see, when you look at even Uganda, we have very many agencies claiming to be fighting corruption, and of course covering the truth more than they reveal it, given the setup with constitutional mandate. Uganda is a member of EAPAC and AfroPAC. EAPAC, the East African Public Accounts Committees, the way they had actually said to them, and if you look at the Kenyan experience, they created the Accountability Kenya. Accountability Kenya was supposed to create Accountability Uganda, was to bring together all these bodies, statutory bodies fighting corruption, into one-stop center, so that there is no duplicity, so that there is even a lot of seriousness the way the issues actually are handled. To me, when you talk about corruption, we start with the budgeting process. Corruption will start from cabinet when it comes to preparing of the budget. If you look at the budget process, the cabinet sets the ceiling of how this budget should be, and that's how the priorities of President Museveni have been to give 300 billion to Roko, to give 500 billion to another investor, to take money out of the budget, which is budget corruption. I'll give an example. Take an example here in Kampala. They have done a kilometer of road at a cost of $4.5 million. Kampala here, that's the cost. Those outer roads, Sasi, where they have done it at 9 billion. So you cannot take even a kilometer that you are fighting corruption per kilometer. you understand? And the debate has been on. The roadman has been trying to shout $4.5 million in existing roads. This is purely corruption. So as we are talking about corruption, it cannot be lip service. What do people want to see about this fight of corruption? Who is in prison and how much has been recovered? You understand? Mere creating units. Actually, it is like, to me, it is just a way of spreading it. We want to start a discussion. You have the Office of the IGG, it has a budget. You have the Ministry of Ethics and Integrity, actually supposed to be the lead agency under the law, Ethics and Integrity. You have it. You have all these which have been created even without a mandate. What you want to see, actually, you know, there was a change on the mode of audit with the value for money audit. But value for money audits were suppressed by government not wanting to protest them over other forms of audit. A value for money audit, for instance, if we did it on Kampala Road and we said let us test 1 kilometer done at $4.5 million, we would know whether actually. But you see, even when we talk about this corruption, as we keep on talking about it, the president has talked tough. The president want to see the president acting tough, and that must start from within. These are the things you're talking about. These technical people. We are dealing with a budget which has been expended. What have we been seeing? In all procurements, you have been seeing directives of people without capacity to go and undertake a project. I was in Parliament with my brother here on Ibomulong. You remember Suno Hydro? Suno, they came in as financiers of the project. They ended up being contractors. But afterward, given almost $500 million as part of their contribution. When they became financial, the Uganda was supposed to contribute their part, and nobody paid the attention. Now it changed. So what people need to know, we know where money is stored. We know where the big money is going. Targeting these talks, picking 1, 2, 3 civil servant, want to start with the budget itself. Because Museveni has no more authority to talk about fighting corruption. When you have just just the budget, you have got a budget where you are donating money to people, to private individuals. That is corruption, under budget corruption, and the effect of it is that it takes away the money from service delivery to a few individuals, and everybody is failing. Otherwise, the idea of fighting corruption should be embraced by everybody, because the suffering we go through as leaders in the communities, if you go to an hospital and there's no service delivery, they'll call Honorable Mulongo. As I said, I've been your supporter, now I'm here. And the penny staking in Honorable Mulongo will fear to be blackmailed. So we'll get the fees for his child and try to help someone who is complaining. Then the other aspect is the interference where the president now is the judge. We were told a story, subject to verification, that actually gave instructions that the judge should not give bail. He wants the trial first to go on, and then he sees how someone is convicted first. That is interference with judicial independence. And you see, you know, I was in the 10th Parliament when we were passing the judicial administration bill. People are opposing the bill, saying, you know, look, for you lawyers, we're just putting money for yourselves to Uganda. We're saying, you know, when these people have money, they have sweet of tenure, they will. Again, they are concentrating about promotions. Because I've been seeing how they do some of the things. Like, you know, I'll take an example of Burola, the former RCC. He comments about corruption, is arrested, arraigned in the court. The charge sheet is defective.
It's like
It's defective. You would have expected the serious judicial officer to grant the state time to go and amend the charge sheet, but at the same time grant bail, court bond to Burola, so that he can come back and attend. But even when you talk about those who are perceived to be engaging in the, or even the proceedings of corruption, you are more punished than the corrupt. And the president needs to withdraw his statements. When he said that leave my Mulongos in as long as they invest here, to me it was not any different from.
Can you clarify that's just
no, I'm just
an imagery?
Okay, when he said that leave my thieves in as long as they invest in Uganda, I would liken it to the statement by my sister, the speaker, when she said, and the MP, that when people steal and they give you, those are our thieves. Because to that extent, corruption has been decentralized.
I didn't know she's your sister.
Of course, she's my sister to the extent that in African sense.
All right.
You understand?
Okay.
But I saw people attacking her, not attacking the president, because the president had actually set the precedent. And do you know the danger of what actually takes place on corruption? I've seen people digging in, celebrating their thieves locally to their areas of jurisdiction. Because people in Musoga were saying, look, they have arrested our son. He's in prison. But this one has been stealing. We have been getting something from this area. You understand? Meaning that corruption is being, in a way, according to the population, also decentralized. We must also sensitize the public that as someone steals money meant for service delivery, there will be no service and they're going to be affected. So under no circumstance must be even the population, because the population must also be questioned.
All right.
At some point.
All right.
Because the procurement processes now which takes place in the government, it is one person determining what it is, sending relatives, friends, and at the end of the day, and in-laws, there will be a very big impact.
All right. Let's hear from Perry. Perry, your take on this. From Changwanzi back to work, the key issues
Has
you've
the
had.
retreat ended?
I don't
The
know.
retreat is likely to end this weekend because it was 1 week.
It's ending in 2 days.
It's a 1 week retreat.
For me, my take is the story of Singapore, how they fought corruption. Is you must be fearless when it comes to applying the rule of law. One of the close friends of the Prime Minister then, the one who really decided, I'm going to fight this thing head on. Her friend was alleged to have been corrupt, and a close friend. So, of course, when he heard, the friend thought he was going to get away with it. The president said, no, let the law take its course. So the guy was so frustrated, he killed himself. This one who had been alleged to have been involved in corruption. And the president goes ahead and visits the wife of the deceased because the wife was so shocked that he had not helped his friend. But what did it say? That no one, regardless of who you are, will be spared in the fight. And you know what that does? It sends shivers down anyone who is even thinking about corruption, because they then take the lesson that if those closest can be penalized, in this case, even he did not go through the court process because he killed himself. I think the evidence must have been there. So what does that say? That with this fight, it has to, the top must be decisive. You look at China, same thing. They're decisive. So everyone knows that if you dip your hand in public resources, there will be serious repercussions. Once you do selective application of the law, that is where the problem starts. That's my take. Thank you.
Sarah, your take very quickly on this issue.
Well, when NRA man President Museveni came to power, point number 7 of the 10 points program was elimination of corruption and all forms of abuse of office. 38 years down the road, President Museveni is romancing corruption. Why do I say so? Because of increasing citizens' agitation and what has happened in Kenya, President Museveni is buying time between citizens' anger and the next election. 2 examples why I say so. During Chogam and Gavi trials, President Museveni was very clear on sending his ministers home until they had cleaned their names in courts of law. They resigned before the trial started on the advice of their boss. Come Karamoja Iron Sheets saga, we see the double standards. 23 ministers are named. The president starts writing romance letters to citizens. I will not spare anybody, you will not. And he does nothing. And as we talk today, he's seated in the cabinet with a minister charged in an anti-corruption court. So what happened to the president? Because many people have been, saying the law is vague on whether people should step aside or not. When the law is absent, under common law regime, you invoke precedents. So what happened to these precedents in Gavi and Chogam trials of ministers? The second issue that shows you that he's just romancing with citizens buying time ahead of elections, budget corruption, as Honorable Mwira has talked about. You have all public money belongs to the people. It's taxpayers' money. So President Museveni distributes government money as if it's his personal funds. Have given Ipineti, have given Rocco, have given whoever. This one is a sister of Gaddafi. This one helped him in the war as justification for throwing around people's money. Isn't that corruption? The second element of budget corruption, among other things, are supplementary budgets to pay salaries. Salaries are a statutory function. If President Museveni's government has no capacity to budget for salaries, and I'm sure in this quarter there will be a supplementary budget, and you see salaries, they've never missed. Let them resign. We have in this country of salaries as supplementary budgets. When you go to this, now the seeming tough talk.
Even before I give information, even he has a budget on donations.
Handouts, of course, he
And
survives.
it is in the billions more than even
And you were passing it
Thank you very
I
much.
would
as
oppose
parliament.
it.
Thank you very much. So the donations, the handouts because of patronage, but the other. And who presides over that? Let's wait for the election. So if he means business this time, let the implicated ministers leave office. Let him start with his cabinet. The rest of it is buying time, is fooling around citizens, is just romancing the storm.
All right. Let's hear from Honorable Mlongo. Your take on what is happening on the fight against corruption.
Thank
in
you
our
so
country
much.
and this cabinet retreat.
Yes. First of all, this is not this is a regular retreat that the government, led by the mighty NRM, meets mid-term to discuss and evaluate performance. And this time the theme is answering the citizens' call, improved service delivery for socio-economic transformation. And so we have the key implementers and policymakers reviewing their performance, and each of the programs under line ministries, departments, and agencies. Of course, among other things that they're looking at is to assess delivery levels and circumstances of impediments. They're also looking at failure of government in addressing certain deliveries of services to the people, given the calls that the government has been receiving. We have the complaints that have come from the public regarding failures in delivery of public services, imparting knowledge and skills to the leaders, building cohesion and service delivery guidance. All the things are very fundamental, because the responsibility we have as NRM government is much heavier than our colleagues who never made it, because the people never gave them those responsibilities. So we have a serious responsibility to discuss and evaluate how we're performing. On the issue of corruption, I am one of those people who are very clear about the need to fight corruption, because one of the things that will bring us down in this government is failure to decisively tackle the question of corruption. And the president, I'm happy, of late, he has come up to visibly be very tough on matters of corruption, and you can see the arrests. Very interestingly, that when the president roars tough and wants to go even an extra mile within the laws, then people begin sympathizing and say, don't do that, don't go. He's trying to be, he was actually advising and appealing to the judiciary, because all these are arms of government, appealing to the judiciary.
Can I
that
give information?
Yes.
The courts don't make the laws. The laws are made by parliament. What the courts do is to administer the law as is, because the law is saying you give bail.
I wish it was as simple as that, because there is also interpretation.
The president has been
And
speaking about having that particular
Then
provision.
change the law.
There is the
We have
issue,
never seen a bill
there
in
is
that
the
regard.
issue of interpretation and discretion. So the appeal is to the effect that really let's have collaborative effort in this, and he's not forcing any courts of law to do that. It is just like you can appeal to the cadres of government in all service delivery areas to ensure that they work coherently together in unison, and that's no crime at all. I want to say that the president is not just romancing. He's not romancing. You see,
he's hugging.
You can say that you can use
Is
the
he hugging or doing what?
You know,
if he's not romancing, what is he doing?
and I can see, and understandably so, people who feel agitated and they want to do mob justice. I think the president is really following the law.
Which should
And the law requires that, of course, as a law established, and the law requires that we observe the law whilst implementing some of these measures.
All right. Dr. Sarah gives one particular example of the Honorable Lugolobi Amos, who has remained in office despite being under trial. Is that good practice?
Of course, Dr. Sarah is a very serious lawyer and a very enlightened, educated person at that level, knows that somebody is innocent until proved guilty.
Are you saying
referring
So-
to cadres, using
yes,
their
yes.
description. When you're saying that you're innocent until proven
Yes,
guilty,
yes,
if
but-
there's a gap in the
but
law, amend it.
Honorable Naduta and Honorable Kitutu
we are guilty
are not yet sentenced. They're not yet.
So if we put it back to you on the issue of bail, so you want people to be incarcerated even before they have been convicted, because the longer you stay on bail, it's injustice itself.
No.
The longer you stay in prison
Of
without-
course, people will get
without
bail,
bail.
but the circumstances of being given bail should be tightened. That's what the president is asking for.
You amend
All right.
it.
And as such, but these are prerogatives of courts. They can see circumstances whether to bail you out or not. So the president is saying, can we be much firmer on this? So to me, I see the president acting his act on the issues of corruption. The other one is we've been having service delivery issues. I remember when we were here and Dr. Birete was shouting about. Sorry, she was not shouting. She was talking very firmly about roads and the Kampala turning into a farmland and so on. But when we started making some of these roads, she's just gone silent. I wish the
which
same.
roads are which road have you
for
made so
several
that I drive
There
on
are
it?
very many roads
Which one?
which are under construction as we speak now in Kampala.
So we can
So-
place the
so-
construction site.
So, for that matter, I wish we used the same voice to say, yeah, the roads are very bad, but this time, they've started making X, Y, Z. To me, that would be a balanced act. So, to me, Chankwanzi is an important mid-term review of performance and to cast light into areas of failures, and some of those failures, we know them very well. The issues of corruption, which are very, very big. There are underperformance and so on. Chief, the question of corruption is not just about numbers. It is about morals. It's about education. It's about sensitization. And one of the things that the CSOs are beginning to plan in this country is to have CSOs that will go on the ground and be given information so that they're able to challenge the service delivery actors, say, in the districts, in the sub-counties, and so on. Because the citizens sometimes are not aware how much money came into the district, how much money has been spent on this and that, whether the money has been diverted or abused. So we need to tackle this head on. In addition to what the president is saying, we should also tackle corruption even in the local governments and in the communities. Sensitizing people.
All right.
And exposing people at all levels, not just at the central government level only.
All right, we have comments coming in. Radio 1, the highest form of corruption is state capture, where one or small group of people controls the key institutions of the state. Unless the state is freed from capture, so that citizens take control, all efforts are in futility. That's a comment from Pat. The statement by President Yoweri Museveni that those who embezzle by accident makes it hard for us who are accidental, for us to know who is an accidental or intentional thief. Remove corruption, and his government collapses. Albert from Entebbe, like someone posted in an inherently nepotism setting, corruption becomes hard to fight. If, as the president usually, to your nephew-in-law is implicated, how can that be handled? Constituting more anti-corruption entities from the same family tree will not solve the problem. Apparently, it appears His Excellency doesn't trust state institutions who report to him. We have other comments from the previous discussion that we had. Honorable Mlongo is surprised by the civility of the Kenyan Armed Forces, not knowing that Kenya, as a professional army and police, not a regime protection force like it is in some countries. They have witnessed change of guard several times seamlessly. In a certain country, the armed forces would be making statements on how they don't accept regime changes by other people other than them. Another comment. Many people in the opposition in Uganda are excited about ongoings in Kenya based on a realistic expectation that some can happen in Uganda. Sadly, they had similar expectation during the Arab Spring, but nothing much happened. Let's calm down and look for other methods of causing regime change in Uganda. A comment from Alan. Why does Honorable Simon Mulongo call Kenyan citizen protest demands betrayal? I thought you politicians always say the youth are the future. That's a comment from Alan. We have another comment. In Kenya, the budget was translated to most Kenyans in various languages who got to understand the breakdown, unlike Uganda, where the budget was understood only in English. We have a comment from Ivan. To be fair to His Excellency Dr. Ruto, he has inherited a system which has been in place since 1963. So to expect him to turn it around without 2 years in office is unfair. To deconstruct the colonial legacy, no doubt will take time, and don't forget there will always be a pushback from outside power with interest in Kenya and certainly any African country. Finally, the GZ's president is not something to be proud about. If we had built a civil method of engagement with our leaders, it would have been much better. We have another comment. The fact is that President Ruto's government collapsed and he will eventually fire himself because he seemed to have burnt all his bridges on his way to power. He forgot that eating with royals does not make you a prince. That's a comment from Benon there. We have Amo Martin listening in from Bali. The rate at which His Excellency Ruto is conceding to Gen Z demands is too high to create any long-term benefits. It appears as if Ruto is more focused on winning his second term at the expense of his unfinished first term. Let him remember that he won by a very narrow margin of only 200,000 votes. Let him shift his gear from the panic mode. Your panelists underestimate Kenyans. Kenya has a very sophisticated, highly educated populace who is digitally savvy, and many have resources accumulated over the years. Many political enemies are also business partners. Ruto's quick response, backing down, is precisely because he knows Kenyans cannot be fooled. There are powerful forces all over. You can't bribe factions to create disunity. You must store. Kenyans are good at convergence. That's a comment there from another listener. Okello Patrick Bonyo from Busega. President Ruto is now panicking and will be making more errors. Dissolving cabinet is not a solution as per now. President Ruto came to power through fake promise and unrealistic to the current economic situation. Mr. Ruto came to power with the mind of revenge, especially to his political rivals. He thrashed the idea of handshake, power sharing. Mr. Kenyatta knew well that he has to handshake with the opposition for him to run government. For Uganda, the Gen Z is still benchmarking from Kenya, since Gen X and Gen Y are compromised by the current government. Well, those are some of the comments that are coming in from the listeners. We go for a break now. When we return, we'll wrap up this discussion and see a way forward for Uganda, of course, connecting to the discussion we were having, the cabinet retreat in Chankwanzi, and the best way forward for service delivery in our country. Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90, review of the major events of the week. This being a Friday, we're focusing on a number of issues. We dealt with the Kenyan situation. Now we are looking at the Ugandan cabinet retreat and the tough talk about corruption. President Yoweri Museveni is saying he's determined to deal with the corrupt. He actually wants them not to be given bail. He actually says he will not accept anyone in his government who is corrupt. So what do we expect from him going forward? Is it a sign that the political will that so many people have been talking about is finally coming to happen? Honorable Muiru, the way forward on the fight against corruption. I know you talked about issues of budgeting, etc. But let's say we have a clean slate to begin from. what we need to do as a country, generally, to deal with this problem. Some people have said it's a political issue. Others think it's a social issue. We need to mobilize, use churches, go to the grassroots, and encourage people to actually take up the matter and demand for action, like President Yoweri Museveni has stated. In Shankwanzi, he did say so. The other day at Kololo, he actually said we should even use the LOC system to actually fight. Are those statements of a man you think is not serious about dealing with the problem?
Well, actually, the corruption in Uganda is systematic and it is structured the way it is, to the extent that the discussion must start about the strategy. So it is not an individual thing by the person who has been presiding over corruption, to be that actually is where the hope is to fight corruption. In my view, we see to start even with the population itself. You say, someone was asking me about politicians, that what's your take? I said, but you see, as long as the process which produces a politician is corrupt, then the politicians themselves are bound to be corrupt. Because you see a candidate selling a house where he has been staying with his family to go and become an MOP. And in the case one who becomes, that self is corruption. Because you are depriving your family of a dwelling place.
It doesn't have a definition in the law.
But it's corruption. You see, from an individual perspective. Two, if I'm coming to seek your mandate to go and represent you in parliament, what does it have to do with me giving you money so that you vote for me? It's that level of desperation, both from the leaders and the population. And unless we address, because you say I was, I've had issues when dealing with our MPs who are in parliament, even within the party. And some of those issues, we are discussing them internally, saying that first, can this process, because I'm one of the view, those who hold the view, that the process, the way it is, it produces corrupt leaders. Therefore, to expect, it becomes an individual thing, where someone is ideological, that his participation in politics is not about itself as unemployment. Because you see, like, my brother here has ever been there. If you check at those, for instance, at Parliament, who of those MPs now is earning even 30% of his salary and emolument? They may not be there. It was all mortgaged in the wake of thinking that they can appease the population. So at the end of the day, the money, he doesn't have the money to earn from Parliament. He doesn't even in the, because now it's very unpopular, and the election is actually coming to an end. So at the end of the day, it is very few who will stick to the rules, and others will be all over looking for money. Because even an MP who is elected and does not attend Parliament itself is corruption. I never moved the motion, you remember? We wanted us to be paid by our attendance. Because there are people who will say, this one is an MP from where, when he has never said anything, when you even don't know it, but you see he's earning money. Because to them, the deal is finished in as long as you become an MP. They wait for deal for another term. So coming from how the system which produces leaders to even, we used to have, my brother here is a security expert, we used to have ISO, but now ISO, people are putting up these structures. The president said, leave them. They are mushrooming when everybody is seeing. And the economic monitoring unit in Xtra was not even saying that what is the source of this person, this so-called investor. Can we look at his returns if he's a business person? What is that business? Well, that's the purpose of all that. So the fight against corruption, it involves everybody. In as long as the religious leader is waiting for a vehicle from the president, even ways at a function. I said, before I have a problem, I've told him to call, to pray for the function. But if you say, if someone say a personal problem, you understand?
I have my vehicle is all done. 206 is around
the corner. in Vujiri, there is one of a leader there. That's what they called him Mlengani. He took on the religious leaders because he was saying, "Look, now you seem to be hired men of God. You seem to be hired men. These politicians who have money,
Hired
come here,
mercenaries.
mercenaries. They have bought for you a vehicle. They have bought for all these people at a lower level motorcycles, and whenever you come to these places of worship, you look at us as subhuman, substandard members of your church. You understand that there would be preference to those who give. And you see, the people, the population, to my surprise, was actually moved that the speech of the leader was very touching. Because as people engage in all this, you receive money for a circle. From government, they say, see, the president is a very good man. Mr. Museveni has given us money. You know, our president has a good heart. Tomorrow, even if Mr. Mulongo is the president, and the policies that he picks public money and dishes out the way he wants, they will be actually, people will be praising him. You understand? But to me, the final bit of it, there are things we can start with, like the Kenyan style. Look at our budget. We do with the negatory expenditure. Because I was going to do a very quick analysis. You see, every government department and agency, they have money for donations. Very interesting. For donations. And if you look at the sums of money involved, this can build the 4 centers in Ibuburu. And my friend, he would be here busy telling us about when the service delivery is center, we need to deal with the negatory expenditure. Those who steal money in the 3% allowed by the law for them to spend, and then they bring the supplementaries. You cannot tell me that you have passed a budget of 70 trillion and you're bringing a supplementary of 35 trillion. Or even because there's when they would be, because this budget, if you cut it down and you remove the money like for the loan repayment, move other things, the recurrent and development. Like my chairman was telling me that they passed a budget of 70 billion. 48 is in the recurrent. you understand? So the smallest budget is what remains for development. But even when you also try to examine this 48, who are the people taking it? Then there are people from the area. So the others, it is in the salaries, what at the end of the day, the regional development money with actually with nothing. So the corruption starts from there.
All right.
It is going to be a concerted effort of everybody. And once we see the president arresting those who bid it, because we actually got a World Bank loan for construction of roads in Kampala, $270 million US. Instead of, and then they had to construct 50 kilometers out of it. Each kilometer at $4.5 million US. Here in Kampala, existing roads. They're not constructing new roads. So if we see them arresting whoever did this, and they demand for our roads from their stomachs, from their apartments, from them, all of us, we shall follow suit. Because people will know that actually the good people are many.
All right.
Out there.
All right.
It is the corrupt who are few, but they have a superimposing kind of character on everybody.
All right. Perry, President Yoweri Museveni is quoted one time saying that the corrupt are very powerful people. If you're not careful, they can take down your government. Could it be a situation where we are? There are so many powerful people out there that our president sometimes is at their mercy, cannot do anything. The general himself.
You see, unfortunately, the buck stops with him. Because when you're the leader, you determine a number of things. You set the pace and the rest follow. And that's why I gave the example of Singapore. That you cannot expect people to be doing everything and then at the end of the day you water down their efforts. Because his statements at times make the fight lose momentum. You know, these are my people, you know. I remember there was a function where the IGG was talking tough about some people in uniform and he said, no, don't touch them. You know, those things send mixed messages. So you have to be able to be tough. I always say it's like in a home, when the leader is fake, the home can't run. Because you set the direction, you influence behavior, you influence action. The rest follow when they see you're serious. And that's why I said it is using your powers to ensure that things are done the right way. All countries where there has been progress in terms of the fight, the leader has been at the forefront. Because power is given to you. That's why you're the leader. The people, relinquish their power through the election. So they expect you to make certain decisive decisions, and they'll follow. It also, of course, the other agencies are also necessary, the courts, but Parliament ensuring that the laws made are able to deal with this vice, because you can't expect the courts to do magic. Like, they can't act outside what the law has provided. So it's important that the leaders, for me, is where the buck starts and stops. The rest will follow suit once they see the leader at the forefront.
Well, Honorable Mlongo, there's been talk about a deep state in our country, and some people have actually been linking it up with that statement President Yoweri Museveni made, that the corrupt are so powerful they can easily take you down. Could it be that Mr. Museveni is actually scared and unable to crack the whip? I mean, he has all the instruments of power. He has the armed forces. He has the institutions of the state. He talks about corruption. Some people actually say, I have a Kenyan friend who says, your president talks well, but most time he talks like the leader of opposition in your country.
Well, I think the president is just very frank. He's so frank that he will tear his own administration into pieces to make a point. He doesn't hide. Even admitting that the issue of corruption is so huge. I think it takes a lot of courage for a leader to say that. So to me, I see that as a credit to him. The challenge we've had is that we've not been having very forward-looking, enforcement activities to make sure that people who are touched in terms of corruption are really tackled. And we see this growing very much. And indeed, some people have amassed wealth out of corruption. If you see the city and other urban areas emerging much faster than social service infrastructure, then there's a big problem. So we need really to move a step ahead. When the president said that let's not go welfare as an indicator, to me that one set us back, because we should really have people held accountable for what they have and explain the circumstances. His word was that let's not have flight of investable money out of the country. But I think that can be dealt with differently. There is no way, and I have to agree with my sister, that we should not handle corruption with the kid gloves, because once you do that, then you're opening room for people to survive and then do even worse things. Do we have a deep state with the people who are corrupt? I think the answer is because the president said it. Being the commander-in-chief, it means, and he's the topmost consumer of the intelligence. So he must be having information about it. Yes, it is true. There are countries where corrupt people become very difficult to deal with. But I think also that Uganda, we are likely to have a president who has capacity, because he has seen a number of institutions grow from nowhere to somewhere, like the military. He really nurtured it from the nucleus. That gives them a lot of resourceful capabilities to deal decisively with the corruption. Then if Honorable Mwiru was elected tomorrow, and then he does not have that inroads of influence in certain institutions.
Well, Honorable Mwiru would give us a fresh start.
Whatever it is, but
a new set of leaders.
What I see that, well, the point I'm making is that definitely President Museveni has
grown the army from national to personal.
At a very big advantage. He has seen it grow. He has seen it grow. It's nothing like national to it's from actually personal to national. Because you started at a personal level, then you came to a bigger level, and now it is a national level. And you can't rule that out. So, to me, he has the best opportunity to really fight corruption better than this. The threat from those people that he mentioned, I believe he has better capacity to deal with them if he decided so. Of course, sometimes you may want, I also know him as a very kind person. Even when he talks of people going to prison, as long as you are incarcerated for some time, he feels, and then you feel like you are repenting and all this. He has that forgiving heart, but that doesn't mean he to relax his grip. Like now, he has shown very good serious signs of cracking the whip. And I would like to see that happen in a bigger way. And as I said earlier, let's not just focus on a few big fish just here. What is happening in the countryside is very big. And local governments, it is so serious that people to be employed in by district service, you must give the job to the highest bidder. They pay money like 5 million, 8 million, even 10 million, and sometimes they get more than a number of applicants for a job. That means they're amassing a lot of wealth. And the whistleblower law that was passed later on, and so on, I don't think it is being implemented effectively. So even people fear to speak about the powerful, corrupt people in the communities. So we must find a multifaceted way of really fighting corruption. It's not just about the president, not just about here and there, but it should be everybody, because accusations of corruption are almost everywhere, in opposition, in the government, in religious institutions. I don't even know where to start from. So we have to have a decisive, multifaceted way of fighting corruption.
All right. We have comments coming in. The proposal of denying bail to corrupt would make sense if all the corrupt big fish and the corrupt small fish are arrested and put in jail. But in the case where there are some untouchables and protectionism of some, it doesn't make sense. That's a comment from Dembe Dumba there. Spectrum Xtra, Uganda is blessed with an asset of that Michiga woman called Dr. Sarah Birete. May God bless her. Let Mulongo be informed that no law prevents Museveni to fight corruption. In fact, the laws are sufficient, except he is the one who does not use the law in the right way and keeps on defending the close corrupt cadres. Spectrum Xtra, I am tuned in from Ethiopia. Spectrum Xtra on Radio 1, I'm tuned in from Ethiopia. To think that the NRM government will fight corruption is a very big myth. Let us accept that we have normalized the vice of corruption. People will criticize corruption on air and go back and do the same. On corruption, we will take the president seriously if he takes action against the Speaker of Parliament and her cronies in Parliament. The Speaker is the face of corruption in Uganda. That's according to Apollo there with that comment. Walube Grasam Ivan from Kamli writes in and says the president's utterances against corruption can't yield any fruits unless more measures like long-term jail sentences, death penalty, and incarceration are used. And then we have another comment. Good evening, panelists. Another word for corruption is contamination. Please, it is impossible to fight corruption. We can only prevent corruption. Fighting it is like fighting bad smell. Remove the dirty, and the smell goes automatically. Actually, it is corruption to remove bail. The opposite of corruption is systems, and that's his comment from Henry Chiwenda. Somebody else writes in and said, I think Museveni is only fighting corruption because these corrupt guys are becoming a threat to his government. Then somebody writes in and says, there's someone you featured on your morning show regarding Bitcoin this week. I would like to connect with them. That's something that we will attend to, dear listener. But gentlemen and ladies, those are some of the comments that are coming in. There's one comment on a lighter note. Dr. Sarah Vilete loves romance. Somebody writes in. I don't know what they actually imply there. The gentlemen and ladies, let's wrap up this discussion and find a way forward. Dr. Sarah Vilete.
But Mr. Moderator, you are being corrupt. No, like Perry said, fighting corruption means being fearless and fearlessly implementing the rule of law. What does it entail to implement a rule of law? You need strong systems. Mr. Murongo, stop intimidating me.
You're protected.
You need strong systems. You need meritocracy in institutions. You need equitable application of the law and a values system. When you look at the way NRM keeps power, how will they deploy the army to beat opposition supporters if we implement a values system and a rule of law? How will they? Because deploying the army, it violates the law in Uganda.
Who keep security?
to beat people.
No.
I was clear on
Security.
beating who beats opposition. You think we don't have them on cameras? So if you implement this various system and fearlessly implement the rule of law, how will you do those funny things during elections? How will you on top as the winner? We have spent 3 years without a governor Bank of Uganda. Isn't that a form of corruption, violating the constitution?
Oh, what
The
is
constitution is very clear. Once you think, the constitution is very clear.
It is because
Yes, we must, a country must have a government.
These two lawyers are mixing up the law.
No,
They're actually saying it as it
as is. So how will you do such? One quote that in a state where corruption abounds, laws, institutions must be numerous. And this is by Xtra. So why am I saying this? Creation of multiple institutions is not a solution. It is part of corruption to weaken the institutions.
All right. Let's wrap it up. Honorable Paul Mwiru, your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
Well, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking forward to see the president act on the corrupt ministers and civil servants who have been mentioned in Dr. General's reports, because under the law, the president is supposed to act as Minister of Finance and issue treasury memoranda as has been brought out by Parliament. And without that, the rest will remain lip services, because at every financial year, Dr. General has been producing reports. Parliament has dealt with them and made a recommendation specifically from some accounting officers and some ministers, and they're still holding offices. We can start with that. I thank you.
Right, Honorable Simon Mulongo.
Yes, for me, I wish Kenya President Ruto the best. He's looking forward to having a broad-based government, a government of national unity. He has engaged the opposition colleagues, President Uhuru and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and others in some discussions that culminated in signing the IEBC law, which means he's really trying to resolve the things, and I hope he comes on the top of the situation. Back here, I want to be happy to show happiness about President Museveni's upping his act in terms of corruption. The way he has restated his position demonstrates some degree of additional seriousness. As members have said, we really look forward to seeing even much more in that line, because that monster in the room called corruption, we all must fight it. It is not just about NRM alone, but all of us, whether opposition, whether the church, CSOs, and so on, we must create an army, a united army of everybody to fight against corruption.
When we create that army, it might result into demonstrations. We will be allowed to actually express ourselves.
Yes, because it will be
Because
together.
an army cannot just be
Yes,
seated.
an army of everybody, including NRM and other parties. It is an arm of everyone. So it is not like NRM will be again isolating itself. We shall be part and parcel of it.
Perry, your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
I think citizens should increasingly see the connection between corruption and the services that they get, especially citizens who don't live where there's more information, like in the central part of the country, where access to radio, to social media is limited. Really, just to make that connection, that part of your status remains as is in terms of access to social services, if you celebrate and partake from the few who then get money maybe in legal ways and give you a few crumbs. So even as we move towards elections, I think it's important for citizens to, of course, reduce their demands on those who are aspiring for election, but to also understand that the more you make demands, you are actually creating a problem which can make this country worse than what an election should be, because ideally once they get elected, they're supposed to govern, plan and manage resources.
All right.
Thank you.
With that, we come to the end of Spectrum Extra, this week's edition. I must thank you, dear panelists, for actually sparing time to be with us this evening. Dr. Sarah Bilete, you want to say something?
No. spaces.
Oh.
Changwanzi is a national space. Let's see Noop also going to Changwanzi. Noop has applied to use Kororo for their 4th year anniversary.
All right.
Let's see Noop access Kororo. These are not NRM spaces.
All right.